Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm so happy you guys are with me, whether it's live, which we might have a few more in a few minutes, or whether you're watching it in replay. I'm very, very excited. Number one, to be part of this conference. So I don't know if you're familiar. This might be the very first time you've ever heard of the ML Summit, the Multilingual Summit, but it's been around for 5 years already. It started as the Virtue L conference, and I had the great honor of being their first keynote speaker back in 2017. And look at how far we've come. I think there were just a handful of speakers, and they were all pre-recorded. And now, thanks to Carol and Katie and Ton's work, it has just blown up into one of the most amazing free PD opportunities for all of us who love, care, and support our students who are learning more than one language while they're also learning content. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for the honor to get to be with you guys. All right. Just a little bit about me. My name's Nancy Motley. I'm a senior consultant with Sidelets Education. I spent all of my teaching career teaching upper elementary through high school, really working with our English learner population. I'm the proud author of the Talk, Read, Talk, Write book, which I'll be sharing a little bit with you later. But today we're talking about a specific population of students. We're here to think about our long-term English learners. So what I'd like for everybody to think about is, who are your long-term English learners? And if you're with me live, if you want to go ahead and utilize the chat on YouTube, you can maybe type in some thoughts you have. So it might sound like this. I would describe our long-term ELs as, when I think about the long-term English learners with whom I've worked, one of the descriptors I would have is the great majority of them have pretty well-developed social English, right? When they came in the room, I could have great conversations with them about how they spent their weekend or some of the things they were interested in. I also noticed a pretty steep drop off in their ability to use academic English. Another way that I would describe the long-term English learners with whom I worked is often they had, how do I put this? They had greater concerns outside of school. They were worried about their job that they had, or they were worried about their family, or they were really focused on things that were far more important to them than my biology class or my 7th grade English class. So that was another one. And then honestly, the great majority of the English learners with whom I worked that were long term, I would also describe them as highly frustrated in the classroom. They just they were doing okay enough, right? But they just had some frustration. And certainly by the time I got to them in upper middle school and secondary, these were kids who had started to disengage, right? They were the ones that would sit at the back and do the bare minimum. And so really what we're here to talk about is, how do we get some momentum with those kids? In particular, some linguistic momentum. So let's look at our goals for today. Our goal for our session is to figure out how to build linguistic momentum specific to our long-term English learners. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify some small moves that just help them get started, right? So the kids that are maybe non-compliant or non-responsive or checked out, how do we get them in? And then once we get them in, how do we get some momentum behind their learning so they stay engaged and they stay with us? And we also have a language goal that's actually tied to one specific small move. So let me introduce that to you as well. Oh, I forgot. I had a great visual for linguistic momentum. This picture, you guys, is of a snowball rolling down a hill or a mountain. So if we start with the ball at the very top, it's a little teeny tiny snowball, right? And then as it goes down the hill, because of gravity, it gains momentum. And what happens to it? It gets larger. So I think this is a really good mental picture for kind of what we want to see happen with our long-term English learners in our classrooms. We're going to dig a little deeper into that on the next slide. Our language goal is specific to one of the small moves we're going to discuss, which is how can we ask more inclusive questions at the beginning of class? So when we start our lessons, how can we make sure that our questioning includes all kids, not just the kids who know it already? And so the some examples of some inclusive questions are, what do you see or what do you wonder when you're putting up visuals? So really kind of when we get to that portion of the lesson, that's a place for us to think about our own language use in our classroom. And by the way, before we get going, I see I have Carolee and Jessica and Robin and Carol. Thank you guys so much for your participation in the chat. This technology stuff is a little outside of my comfort zone, and there is a delay on the live feed. So I appreciate your participation, even though I might have missed it right when you put it up there. Okay, what is linguistic momentum? Well, this picture I just described is a way to think about momentum. We know the word momentum. It means I have energy behind something. I have passion behind it. Once I get started, momentum means it's like you almost can't stop, right? That's what we want. Now, what happens if I put linguistic in front of that? So I want that kind of passion and energy behind language acquisition. So I'm going to just give you kind of a range. If I have no linguistic momentum in my classroom, what that would look like for my long-term English learner is they're not responding. Once we do some things to help get momentum, if we have momentum like where we almost can't even stop, right? They're using language, it's great. What's the best case scenario of what we want to see? That is students in my class who are able to offer to their peers and to me and throughout the school day really complete and articulate responses about what they're learning using the academic language of the lesson. So if we wanted to connect this visual to what I have, the very top of the mountain would be no response. And what is this big giant ball? This is our complete and articulate response with academic vocabulary. So the big crest, the rub is, how do we get this? How do we go from point A to this final point? Well, let me just show you what some breakdowns might look like. Everyone take a second and you can read those breakdowns. I'm all about small moves, right? What's the next thing that is going to help my kids move forward? I can't go from no response to write three sentences using the sentence stem. We probably won't get there. But what I could do is get no response and move kids forward with a nonverbal response, and then move them forward with a one-word response, and then move them forward with more than one word, but it's not quite complete, then to complete, and then to a full complete response, right? Think about the LTELs with whom you work. We probably have students that fall in a lot of places on this continuum, right? So if you're thinking about a particular student that you had in summer school this year, they might already be right here in the continuum. Okay, so how do we do this? I'm going to offer you kind of two ways to think about this. When we look at the beginning part, when kids aren't responsive or barely responsive, what we want to focus on here is just giving them an accessible entry point. I almost think about it like this. I've opened the front door wide open, but nobody's walking in. Where can I crack the windows and open the back door, right? I want to give them a way in to the lesson. So our first big rock for this short session is thinking about, what do accessible entry points look like? And once I've got them willing to make a response, how do I get that momentum going where they're using lots of vocabulary and having rich conversation and fully articulated written responses? The way I'm going to do that is with low stress output opportunities. All right. So let's think about the accessible entry point. I'm going to put up something and I'd like you to reflect. Have you ever said this before in your class? Who can tell me what they know about an animal's habitat? Who can tell me what they remember from yesterday about RNA and DNA? Who can tell me what you've heard about the American Revolution? We've all said this. If you haven't said it, you're lying to yourself, right? We've all started our lessons this way before. And the reason is, what are we trying to do? Access prior knowledge, right? Here's the problem with this phrase. Who can tell me what they know about blank? Who are the only kids who can answer that question? The ones who already have background about it, right? So when I start my lesson this way, what I'm doing, I call it, we're teaching to the knowing. And so what I want to be thinking about is how can I, instead of teaching to the kids who already know it, how can I pose a starting or a beginning question in a way so that all students, in spite of their background knowledge, can participate? So what I'd like for you to do, or we're going to do, not you, me, what I'm going to do is walk you through how I could take kind of a more standardized question, like who can tell me what they know about, and how can we move it to being highly accessible for all students, in particular, our kids who have been in our programs for 6 or more years. That's how they're classified as a long-term English learner. They've got some English skills. These are not newcomers we're talking about, but these are kids who are not entering the lesson sometimes, right? So let's pretend I'm in a science class, middle school science, and this might be my typical way to begin. Who can tell me what they know about the Earth's layers? This falls into that category, right? Unless I know about the Earth's layers, I can't participate. So how do we shift that? Well, one way all of us, I know all of us know to make it more accessible is we're going to provide a visual support, right? So a student who might not have any background at all about the Earth's layers, if I pose that same question, who can tell me what they know about the Earth's layers? And they can look here, right? Even if they don't feel real confident that they know something, they can gather some input. I would argue we're not super accessible here, though, because if I'm a 13-year-old kid and I'm looking at this picture, I might in my head go, well, you know, that it kind of looks like it might be hot on the inside. I might have an idea, but who can tell me what they know? I don't feel like I know that, so I'm just going to wait. So how can we transition it to make it the most accessible for all kids? I'm going to keep that same picture and I'm going to shift what my question looks like. What if I put the picture up and I say, what do you see? What do you notice? What I love about this inclusive question is your kids who know a lot, right? Your oohers, your shouter outers who are almost never your LTELs, right? These kids, they can share all the gobs of knowledge they know by answering those two questions in a really detailed way. But a student who might have very limited or no background about this topic, do you see they still have an entry point, an accessible entry point for all? You guys, when I ask this question, when I hit that third mark, what do you see? What do you notice with some visual supports? What I'm communicating to my class is that today's learning is for every single one of you. What we're learning today is so important that I want to make sure that I've opened the door, I've opened the window, I've opened the back door, I've knocked down a wall if I have to. I will make it so that every single one of you can enter this lesson. Okay, I'm going to offer you 3 specific strategies for creating accessible entry points, 3 ways to kind of open the door for all, if you will. All right. The first one I just modeled for you, which is asking kids to respond to a visual. Now, this icon right here is of my book, Talk, Read, Talk, Write. These 3 ideas are housed in the resource. There's lots of other great stuff in there too, but this is where the information came from. So let's pretend you teach 6th grade reading and you're getting ready to do a novel study. I might put the picture of the novel up, and instead of saying, what can you infer by what you see on the hands? Instead of saying that, I'm just going to say, what do you see? What do you wonder? Now I have an entry point for all. By the way, if you're not familiar with this resource, it's an excellent novel about a 12-year-old Pakistani girl who wants to be a teacher and how all of the challenges with the community in which she lives get in her way. So this is a great read if you teach or support kids at that level. All righty. Second way to create an accessible entry point for all. I use this one a lot with my older learners, which is asking an interesting or a provocative question. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean a question that is weird. It's unusual. The 2 kids who are always in the back kind of whispering on their own and never paying attention, when you pose the question, they stop and go, what did Miss Motley just say? That kind of question. something that's compelling. The one that even the kids who do not like sitting in school, their brain starts thinking about the answer without you even like pushing them to do that. So what are some examples? If I teach high school history, one example might be, is war sometimes necessary? There's no right or wrong answer to that. I would argue it's a pretty compelling question. And many of the students with whom we work, they have some background about this, so they might have a very strong response. Let's go a little lower. Let's pretend you teach elementary. What's an interesting or provocative question? Maybe in science, you just finished talking about mammals and you're getting ready to talk about the characteristics of fish. I might begin my lesson by asking kids, boys and girls, do you think fish sleep? I mean, do you think fish sleep? I don't even know if they sleep. So it's the kind of question your brain, now you want to Google it, right? So the idea is thinking of a way to bring them into the lesson, almost like without them even realizing they're engaged, they're engaged. All right, and then the third idea for creating an accessible entry point, this idea, if we want momentum, we've got to get them started, right? How else can we get them started? By asking them to make a choice about something. When I give kids options, the act of selecting an option, the act of choosing engages them. Once I've decided something, do you see, I want to know if I'm right or not. I want to measure what I thought, what I chose against what's about to happen in the lesson. So high school English, we're reading Romeo and Juliet. I might say, guys, hang on, let's stop for a second. Do you agree or disagree with what Romeo just did? No right or wrong answer with that. But do you see, once a kid has decided, well, I agree or I disagree, now I'm invested. I've entered. Let's go to maybe a science question. Maybe you guys have been working with animal adaptations, right? So what I might do is I might put these pictures up and I might say, guys, out of these 3 animal adaptations, so this polar bear's white fur, this duck's webbed feet, and look at these giant ears. Which one of those 3 do you think is the most helpful? Once again, no right or wrong answer. Once they have made the decision, let's say a kid picks the polar bear. Even if they're not really sure, do you see they're invested, that we've entered? So now we will get that one-word response. We will get that nonverbal response. We will get that short answer response. And that's what we want. It's all about getting them started. Okay, so our first big rock was this idea of creating accessible entry points. So I'd like for everybody to think about what we talked about. And if you're inclined to, you can go ahead and share your thinking in the live chat right now. I can create more accessible entry points by. When I reflect on this, for me, kind of my biggest aha on these first few slides that we've just worked with is really thinking about, is the way I'm beginning my lesson casting that net over my entire class, right? Is the way that I'm hooking kids or beginning, is it accessible to every single student in the class? That's really what I would want to be focusing on moving forward. All right, I'm ready to transition to our second big rock. So we've got kids entered. We've created some accessible entry points where they're willing to check in, okay? And it might only be with the one-word response. It might only be non-verbally, but they're making a choice. They're responding to a visual. They're telling you what they see in the picture, right? Now the question is, how do I continue to snowball effect that language to get them to that more full and complete academic response, right? And we're going to do that with low stress output opportunities. So we've got them in the door here, and we're going to keep the momentum going by really being thoughtful about providing low stress output opportunities. So let me define what I mean by that. What do I mean by output? I mean speaking or writing. If we're talking about linguistic momentum, language momentum, the output is either speaking or writing. So for the remainder of today, or this session, if I'm talking about talk, know that writing fits in there too, okay? So either output opportunity. Now, what do I mean by low stress? this is kind of subjective, right? What I find stressful and what you find stressful are very different. We do have some terminology in our field, though, that kind of helps us understand low stress. What I mean by low stress is that the affective filter is not engaged. Many of you are familiar with the term. If you're not, the affective filter is basically a metaphor that when we have students in our classroom who are acquiring English, if they have a negative response to what's going on around them because they're lacking in confidence, because they're worried they're going to be embarrassed, because they are feeling rushed or insecure, right? Those kind of affective domain, social emotional responses. If I'm having those responses, language acquisition is not occurring, right? I'm kind of emotionally charged in a negative way. So I'm not really focused on language development, or for that matter, content development. So the way we want to lower that, we want to make sure that those responses are not there, that they're disengaged or lowered. Okay. I'm going to offer you 3 characteristics of low stress output opportunities. Now, each one of them can stand alone, but the way we have a classroom where kids' affective filter is not engaged is when all 3 are working in combination. So kind of as we go through these, you can self-assess, is one of these maybe more of a growth opportunity than another one for me, okay? One characteristic of low stress output is that it's brief. No one likes to be told, please discuss for 5 minutes at your table what you've learned in chapter 2. That feels super overwhelming, right? So let's just keep it short. So in my classroom, we want to be thinking about giving kids opportunities to talk or write that are brief. I'll quantify this for you. Oh, and by the way, all of the quantification I do on this slide is my personal experience. I haven't done the research to see if it's out there to support it, but in my action research with my own kids, these are the recommendations that have really worked for me. If you teach littles, I'm talking about 30 seconds or less. And if you teach older kids, I'm talking about a minute or less. So guys, we just watched that video on the structure and function of the cell wall. I'm going to give you just a quick second or two. Check in with your partner about what you understood. So we're going to be real short. I will tell you part of the reason why we get away from brief. We intend to be brief, but you know what we do when we let kids talk? We go around the whole room trying to listen to everybody. And then what does that do? It creates stress. Kids are not low stress anymore because me and my partner, even if I was willing to take a risk and I talked about it, I did, but now I have all this extra time and I don't know what else to do with it. So kind of the way we monitor interactions is another variable connected to keeping this opportunity short. Second characteristic of low stress output is we want to make sure that we are targeting that output. Let's just tell kids the words and phrases that we want them to use. Instead of saying to a kid who is acquiring the skill of learning English, figure it out on your own. I'm saying, hey, when you tell how you explain the problem, I'm listening for you to use the words add, end, and sum, right? When you can tell that you agree or disagree with what Romeo did, here's how it sounds, you guys. I disagree because. So you see, when we give them those starters and those keywords, it feels much easier. It's like we gave it to them on a silver platter. Now, targeting the talk, I want to make this a little bit more specific for you. What I'm going to put on this slide, I would highly recommend you guys make a visual for yourself. So create maybe an anchor chart of this slide and have it on your wall, not for your kids, for you as a cue to remember to do it. Every time we ask kids to talk, imagine the power if we did this. So the one that we see the most is this. Guys, you're going to talk with your partner. Here's your sentence stem. Awesome. Another variation of that I use as kids acquire more English, right? If I have a lot of long-term ELs that are more on the advanced high, proficient side of language development, I might say this, use these words. And I just cue them to the vocabulary words that are already posted by my goals for the day. The next 2 I really like because I feel like they're a little more organic, if you will. And I've already used them with you today. So guys, I'm going to let you check in with your partner, but it should sound like this. Or, hey, at your group, you're going to discuss the two causes we just discussed about the American Revolution, but I'm listening for taxation without representation. So I'm going to give them a very short output opportunity, and I'm going to tell them exactly how it sounds. Both of those things allow a kid who's already willing to enter, because I've given them an accessible entry point, it gives them a way to be successful. Okay, the third and final descriptor is the hardest for me to remember, but I think it's critical. We have to be consistent. If they get to do a ticket out at the end of every class, that is good, but it is insufficient. The writing feels stressful every day because I've only done it once at the end of the day. If I always deliver a lecture for 15 minutes and then I say, turn and talk and discuss what you've learned in your notes with your friends, that still feels stressful. What we want to do is do it so often that we've normalized it. So let me quantify this. If you teach littles, I'm talking about every 2 to 3 minutes. If you teach older learners, maybe every 5 to 7 minutes. So this number line is a little bit of information, opportunity for output, little bit of information, opportunity for output. Most of our long-term ELs don't like to participate orally or in writing because it's stressful. But do you see, if it happens every 5 minutes in class in a real short way and my teacher gave me the words I need to use it, we've normalized it. In fact, I would go so far as to say we've automated it. And what happens then? Even kids who don't necessarily prefer to use it, or they might lack confidence, they gain in confidence and they gain in linguistic momentum. So very quickly, when we have these three in play, you do have kids that are able to fully articulate their thinking in a more efficient way. Oh my gosh, we only have a couple of minutes. So I'm going to wrap up right here, and then I'm going to see if I can find a question to answer. How do we build linguistic momentum, you guys? It's a two-part equation. We've got to provide kids an accessible entry point. And once we've done that, we want to give them low stress opportunities for output. So I'm going to put up my contact information. This is my Twitter handle. Definitely don't forget to hashtag ML Summit if you're on Twitter. This is my email address if you'd like. And I'm going to take just a couple of seconds to look and see on Twitter if I have maybe 1 or 2 questions that we have time to answer before we wrap up. All right, let's see here. Okay, so one of the ideas that has come up is this idea of what this looks like in whole group versus in small group. I think sometimes when we pull kids in small group, let's pretend we only have 4 or 5 long-term English learners all there because they have a common need. Sometimes the fact that they're in small group, it makes me feel like they're all participating. Even in small group, we usually have a more knowing or a more verbal and a less verbal. So I think this idea of even that quick turn and talk with 2 people here and 2 people here, and I'm partners with the last one, every 5 to 7 minutes is just as valuable in small group as it would be in whole group. All right, you guys, that was fast and furious. I want to honor your time and make sure that you get a chance to get to all the other awesome presenters today. If you have colleagues who weren't able to see this, please push it out to them. It's going to be available to you for eternity or longer. I don't know. Again, you have my contact information, and I really appreciate you guys being with me. And I look forward to all that I'm going to learn from you guys as we go through the rest of our day. So we're all finished.